in this year or these years of my parental leave, I actually have learned something that I call maybe existential frameworks or lenses through which we can view ourselves and life in different ways that have been very helpful in observing dynamics between me, my kids, my family overall. It's like I learned languages that just help me to pinpoint other things that I didn't have available by just using, these traditional kinds of like the Myers-Briggs framework, or if you categorize people as introverts or extroverts, or these days we have all kinds of, well, the DSM, all of these ways that we can also then go into the ways that people maybe differ from the norm or neurodivergence. I have many thoughts, many contradicting thoughts around all of these developments, and sometimes that may be for the better, and sometimes those categorizations create stumbling blocks. And in the end, I realized that what I'm personally after is some kind of a pragmatic, practical guidance, something that's actually just helpful in my everyday life. And that's what I keep falling back on in what I want to share on this podcast on Mr. Studies, is more and more going towards like, yeah, it's amazing what exists in the world, what kind of perspectives and knowledge, information, but in the end, like what's it all for? Why does it matter? I do fall back into an approach of some kind of usefulness, something that I can actually hold up and show that, hey, this is useful because of this, or this has been useful for me because of this. And that's why I want to share it. So others could potentially get a benefit who maybe resonate with my approach or could also get use from it. And maybe everyone doesn't get a use from it, but someone might. And that gives me a purpose for, like a deeper meaning for why it matters, why it holds value for me to share these things, than just being like untethered from the thought that it could hold value for someone. If I'm like playing around with thoughts and knowledge, that's great, and you can do that, and it's more like an entertainment thing, but I also wanted to, maybe I'm an educator by heart. I wanted to offer some tools that someone else can then pick up and use for themselves. So about these existential frameworks, I've been waiting many years before I even started talking about these because they are kind of woo, or for my mind, where I'm coming from, they appear to be. But these days, maybe people don't categorize things in that way as much as before. So that can be just like my old programs of this is scientific and this is like pseudoscience. And maybe sometimes there's a place for those categorizations too. And they both can hold different types of value. They have their place in the world. But with that rambling introduction again, I guess I want to say or further emphasize the point that I accept that I mean, I can't say what's what. My understanding is way too limited, but I can say what has had practical use in my life. And that's what I'm going to focus on sharing. And then everyone for themselves can feel into it, hopefully, and see how it relates to their own life, what they feel. And yeah, let's jump into it. So, before I even became a mother, I lived alone for a few years, and I did go inwards and do a lot of like what I thought at the time was shadow work, or trying to like meet myself fully, face sides of myself that I had suppressed. But when I gave birth to my first child, it was like something, yeah, burst, more than just literally that child bursting out. It was like something in all those suppressed layers that had been like really, it's like all out. And no way for me to like rein it in, and that resulted in quite an intense few years of what can be seen is usually described as a postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, that um, expressed in anger mostly, and frustration, and well, also depressive states. And the thing is, when I went to talk with therapists, I tried a few times. There were some areas where it had helped me. It really helps to just express something to someone that you have been holding in, and then have it mirrored back to you, that kind of confirmation about your experience. And that's talk therapy really holds a valuable place for those kinds of things. But in the end, it didn't really like help give me guidance in how to interact with people, or with like on an energetic level, because those kinds of therapeutical interventions or methods are not founded on these ideas of energetic entanglements or interactions. And then I was listening to my podcasts when on parental leave. I take in a lot through the years because I have to be aware otherwise, but I also have a need to take in something else than just like babbling with the baby. So I used to listen to a lot of podcasts, and then I found this system of, or framework of, or lens, language, what to call it, of human design, and stumbled upon it. I was looking like, okay, what's this? It's supposedly like describing how our energy, yeah, functions, or who we are, as many of these frameworks have as their whole purpose, or partly at least. And at first I was a bit like, yeah, I don't know, it seems a bit complex. There's all of these weird words and ways of describing things. Apparently I'm some kind of a generator, like who generates energy. Does that mean I'm just like a workhorse for people to be used, or what? And there comes all these defenses of the mind in the very beginning. And that's the fascinating thing about this system, is that that's exactly kind of what it points out and helps you uncover and go deeper into. And at that point, I was in a strange place where I knew the situation I was in with my, that point, I think a half-year old, no, 1.5-year-old baby, 1-year-old baby, and quite a new relationship. It was a very turbulent time of big shifts in a very short period of time. And I had a big challenges with the baby. My firstborn was really bringing up a lot of emotions in me, and we had so many kind of, just so much, even as a tiny baby, is like something kind of really fanning the fires, or how to say it, like some people really like, I've noticed in my life, there's something going on where we can easily get into these loops of the emotions being like going totally into a whole new realm of, and how to deal with that. And then I just happened to check, or I intentionally checked that my child has something that's in human design described as emotional definition, that their emotional center is defined, or solar plexus center, that's described as, and I have an undefined emotional center. And these these descriptions might sound a bit confusing if you don't have a perspective into human design on your own, but I kind of intentionally let it be like, take what you can gather and leave the rest, because this is not meant to be like an introduction to human design. You can find that on other places. This is meant to just share my experience and show why it had value for me. So when I understood that, my child has a type of energy flow that's kind of meant to transmit their emotions out. They're meant to affect the world with their emotional experience, or they have a different way of existing in terms of they have that kind of emotional wave that they just go through consistently every day. And I started to really see that and observe that, and it was totally accurate with what I saw in human design. And I could have never seen that pattern as clearly if I didn't have it written, that they have a kind of wave that builds up. They build up this kind of excitement to something. Oh, I really want to that. I want to do that. I want to, these ideas, this beautiful creativity, curiosity. And then when something doesn't exactly match with their expectations, it's a crash. It's a huge crash. And then those were the toughest part for a parent, like how to deal with helping your child through that crash and get them up again, get them happy again. And then a big key in the human design approach was like, you don't need to solve anything. They just have their emotional wave. They have their process. And you can support it by letting them have their process, letting them have their emotions. And it takes a huge load off the shoulders. And at the same time, it feels a bit hopeless, to be honest. Like, I can't solve anything, I can't help anything. So there's these paradoxes at play where the mind wants to always do stuff, do things to change and solve. But it's not for the mind to solve, particularly when it comes to other people. And that's a huge challenge in parenting overall, that we do have a huge responsibility for another person and we want to help them. At the same time, we have to let them be and develop on their own, or that kind of narrow path to navigate how to not veer too far in either direction. Like, but it still helped me to observe and try out a new approach. Like, okay, what if I just let them have their emotional process, but I'm there as far as I'm able. Of course, at that time, I still had my own postpartum stuff, emotional bursts, outbursts, and it's been a work in progress, as these things always are. And then the other key for me that has shifted me into really appreciating what can be understood through this kind of framework or lens was that I myself, I had an undefined emotional center or solar plexus center, that meant that I'm actually a person who really takes in the emotions from anywhere, all around me, and then there's a big chance that I'm gonna distort those and amplify those, because that's just how my energy functions. And when I'm alone, I'm generally quite, when I'm just going about doing stuff or walking in the forest or somewhere where I'm not affected by other humans, generally, it's quite like stable baseline. It's very different. And that was the big shift in having this little baby who have these bursting emotions, this kind of process that goes so up and down. that I was basically being like a huge magnifying force when I was getting entangled into those emotions, because that's how my energy functions. And that was eye-opening to look back on my life overall. And at the first few years, when you get some new language or new lens to see something through, it's so easy to fall into this victimization because you have to process things from a new perspective. And I did that too. I was like, oh man, it wasn't my fault that I had all these emotional outbursts. It's everyone around me. I'm just amplifying their shit. So I went through all of those kinds of yeah processes of contemplating and looking back on my life and seeing those dynamics, energetic dynamics at play in my life. And at the same time, now I have come to a place of, yeah, it's not good or bad. It's not really that I was like a victim that got attacked by other people's emotions. It's just as well like if you understand how you work, you have information, awareness, you can work with that to your benefit. And now that I have this understanding, I can also use that, and I'm able to, in a different way, maybe keep a bit more of a detached stance when there is a huge emotional some kind of a situation going on. It just means that I can feel all of that emotion. I take it in because that's how I work. But I have a space there where I can notice, these emotions are here all around, but I don't have to like take it deeply, fully into myself. Because that's the moment when it gets distorted. Because it's not actually mine. It's not actually mine. I do have my own emotions, but in a strange way, my emotions are often, they have often gotten some kind of a, well, like I guess most people, like an initiation or ignition from an outside source. And in my music, in my creations, I work with a lot of emotional processing through music particularly. And it's not the emotions that are bad, or they can be overwhelming, but like the emotions in themselves, that's this beautiful spice that it brings into life, or just the heart. And the thing that I realized through all of these lenses was like, that's what I appreciated also in human design, was that it's actually trying to be, supposed to be a kind of neutral presentation of, hmm, these tendencies exist, these kinds of qualities, ways of being exist. There are different people in this world, so many different ways that energy can express, and none of it is better or worse. It's just different. If you think about that, if you really think about that approach, it's quite beautiful, because at least the way I was brought up, it wasn't maybe expressed outright explicitly, but there were always these expectations of, this is the right way of being, this is a good person or a smart person, this is it, this is like the frame you have. And if you can't fit in that frame, then okay, then we can categorize you as off somehow, or oh, you need to work on that. Or maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the overarching energy was a bit more like that, and that's going to create a whole lot of suffering of majority of humanity trying to put itself into this tiny box. And instead you have like, every single human being is their own little box, or huge box, or multi-dimensional box. It's quite a cool perspective to have. And that helped me to be a lot more accepting of others. And that's maybe a even more valuable shattering of my perspective that I got through this framework was that, oh, so because my energy works a certain way and I'm able to generate energy, actually, yeah, I know I am. I have energy to do things I love like this, and I get energy from it. I have been expecting other people to be able to get things done in the same way that I can. But everyone isn't here to get things done, at least not the kind of things or the kind of way that I do. Some people are here to reflect back what they see and bring their awareness or their emotional depth. And those things haven't been appreciated if the framework is focused on or the norm is focused on. We all have to just bring this generative force of building and constructing and doing. So I'm really grateful for those shifts in my perception, in my awareness that I got from human design. And at first, I was planning on calling this series of where I go through a few of these different frameworks. I was planning on calling it a skeptic's guide to human design or something like that, because while I'm sharing these things, while I'm sharing how valuable it's been, I'm still a skeptic by heart, and I've accepted that about myself now over these last few years. Like, I'm always gonna have one foot in something and the one other foot is somewhere else. Like, I'm always a bit in between of things. I'm never fully in it, and I'm not meant to be. I can see, oh, this has value here, this has value here, this has value here, but I'm not meant to be. I feel like I'm not for dogmatically following something. Doesn't even have to be dogmatic. Can just be that some people are more focused and that's how their energy is, that they are really focused on human design and that's their thing and they enjoy it. And I also can enjoy it, but I can always also, or I have always have a need to kind of question it at the same time or challenge it at the same time. And that can be my whole open head thing, that if you know human design, you know I'm really, everything is just coming in and going through, and other people might be more like they have a certain way that they bring their particular way of processing things, their particular perspective, and they can more focus on one thing, and they're meant to do that. So a skeptic's guide to human design, it basically means that I just want to bring some examples of a little introduction, I guess, into the system, how it's been useful for me. At the same time, there are things we can be skeptical about. That's fine, that's part of it. And as with everything, anything really, like if you really get stuck on something like this is the one and only truth, it can go sideways. Because life is so strange and multifaceted, complex, or maybe it's simple, but for us humans, the way we function, it feels complex. And I don't feel like there's one right way or one right truth. We can use these kinds of lenses as guidance, as a support structure in the times when we need them. And then the support structure will fall away naturally when we don't. And that's part of the process. So in presenting these examples, it's like the intention is to hold it with an open hand where someone can pick up something that feels like a bit helpful to them and then throw away the rest. And so on. So in human design, if we want to also go into a bit of an introduction for the people who might not have any idea what I'm talking about, it's based on many different things such as astrology, both the sidereal or sidereal, I don't know how to pronounce that, and the tropical astrology, and also I Ching, which is a system I really have used many years. I have these kind of I Ching cards there in my shelf where for every season I take two cards that present the now, this present moment, and then the future, and I kind of live in the see from the relations between them where I'm at in my process. And well, I have these little tools, and maybe I can share more about I Ching in a later video. But it's a Chinese kind of I don't know how to describe it even, so I won't even try right now. And then it also has a bit of inspiration from the Kabbalah and the chakra system, in the way that it takes the astrological wheel, if you have seen these for birth horoscopes or birth charts, I guess. And then it places it like on a shape that's a bit like a human being, with these different energy centers that correspond to different ways that the energy is processed or expressed through the system of the human being, the human body. And that's a body graph. And the thing that helped me with that was that it brought these energies back into the physical reality of my body, or brought the experience back into my real physical being. Not that the non-physical is less real, but here, like me, I needed that grounding because I'm tending to live here somewhere, I don't know, outside of my physical being. And I had been studying astrology for a few years before I learned about human design, and it felt like I was stuck out there in space a bit. And that's why I kind of stopped. I felt like, yeah, that's not actually helpful to me. I need something else. It's interesting, fascinating, it has its own place, but for me that didn't feel like the place where I would focus my energy. And then I saw this body graph, which is just mostly a visual representation, and visual representations really help me to understand things. So that felt like, yes, that clicked and helped me also to come back to earth a bit, in a way. And in the end, all of that is some kind of a system and visual or expression that a human being has just created, that everyone can question. Anyone could question, is it valid, or is it, and there's a place for questioning as well. And that brings us to this whole, the idea of being skeptical about everything, which is my approach. I'm skeptical, but I take what has value, what resonates. And that is being skeptical, because being skeptical of everything just for the sake of being skeptical also is a bit senseless. It's more like being skeptical because that if that means it's gonna help you be open. And as I said before, that's because I am very open in my energy. That's right for me. So might be different for someone else. So that's the issue I was thinking of with human design and all of these systems, was like, what if we're just like actually unaware of how we are again just putting ourselves into a box that's made up of these descriptions, like I'm a generator, or I have an undefined emotional center. So, and what if that's not actually true? Or what if I just, because humans are, everyone is like the way I see it, everyone is moving, shifting, energy, strangeness, multidimensionality. No one is actually possible to put into that box. So what if that is just another, self-fulfilling prophecy? That, okay, someone tells me I'm that, and I become that when I read about that. And what if that's actually harmful? And it can be. So I didn't talk about these things because I was afraid someone else is gonna go out and like look up their own design, their body graph, and be like, oh, I'm that, and that's gonna be very restrictive too. But then a shift happened when a few years I processed this, I've experimented with it, I experienced that something opened up in my life where I do feel much more just at peace with myself, with what I still feel is myself. There's something about it that's so deeply, deeply helpful that, okay, if it is another box, okay, but it's a helpful box. That's where I landed. It actually is a helpful box, and I have the disclaimer for myself in my mind that I know this is a lens, this is a box that I'm using, this is a support structure or a scaffolding that I'm using to get access to some perspectives of energy or energetic dynamics between people, between myself and the world. And at the core, it's pretty simple, but it's also very complex. But at the core, it's simple because it brings, in human design, there's something called a strategy and an authority. I'm just going to focus on strategy here, which means that there's one overarching approach that you can use in your life when you make decisions, when you meet some new information that you have to relate to in some way. And every single human being can have one strategy that's for them. And because I'm a generator, I respond to life. I bring things to me and then I respond to them because that's how my energy works. I generate the energy and someone feels that, or somehow I draw things in, and then I have a gut response where I feel yes or no. Yes, I want to get involved in this, or no, my energy doesn't want this. Really focused on energy, actually. It's like my energy is there for it and I move towards it, or my energy is not, doesn't want to be used for that. And that's made my life pretty, in one way, very simple, in other ways, very complex, because now I have, if you imagine that someone who used to be a people pleaser, kind of, if you imagine a life where I used to be able to push myself to do things I didn't actually want to do, some ways that makes life much simpler because I just get things done, do the stuff. But I was extremely exhausted at times. I was extremely angry at times, frustrated. I was laying on the floor after a work day because I had been pushing myself. And then in comparison, these days, I can pause and feel if I actually want to do something. If someone suggests something to me and my energy is like, no, then I can say no. And if I feel like the energy is there and I feel kind of lit up or ignited by it, then I go for it. And it has actually shifted things. And maybe it's just the basic foundational thing of even checking in with yourself first. And that can take different forms for different people. But nonetheless, it was valuable for me to just get that reframe like, hey, I'm actually allowed to feel into my energy. So, human design is a deeply kind of individualized, differentiated system. It's not meant for creating masses of people that get to do what you want them to do. It's for trying to provide individuals with a manual where they can experiment with how their energy works and how to find a way to make decisions and do things in a way that's aligned with how their energy works. And then everything is a unfolding of a dance with the world around you, with the people around you. Like, I'm a parent. I'm gonna do stuff that maybe I don't have a really strong, excited reaction for because I'm gonna give my kids food. I'm gonna help them to the best of my ability. So everything has nuance, but the overarching, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, now the overarching background frequency of my life and my little sphere is that of me respecting my own energy and myself, which also kind of does color or bleed into, in a beneficial way, into my life, into the relationships. And that's why I think that these systems that are helping and supporting individuals, or that's what I see is the purpose of that, they actually help and support the collective. They do help the world heal. But that's something we can have different views about because, on the other hand, I remember Ayn Rand writing this work about a society of people living somewhere where no one, everyone is just gonna do exactly, well, now I'm paraphrasing, but there's a lot of these like, there's so much nuance and so much interesting perspectives you can have about things. And this is my open mind really like grabbing something. Oh, let's add a little bit of a paradox here and contradiction here. It can't be that simple. I can't express things in a way that this is the only thing. Because there are the perspectives that are also valid where it's like, okay, but what if everyone just only is selfish or doing only what's like good for them but doesn't care about others? But again, there I've landed in understanding that when I do something that's good for me, that doesn't mean automatically it's gonna be bad for others. And that's a big thing about people pleasing that is just needing to be looked at and healed. Is like, just because I'm pushing myself to do something for another being doesn't actually make it better. Maybe I'm taking away a chance for them to learn something on their own. And maybe there's actually going to be resentment and bitterness if I'm doing something that I don't actually feel is mine to do. So if I instead focus on, oh, so how do I want to live? What do I want to do? And that's my responsibility. That's my process. And everyone does that in their own life. That's glorious. At the same time, we can also support each other in the best ways we have. And in my focusing on what I want to do, what's meaningful for me, I have also realized that what is meaningful for me is that I can use my insights or skills, whatever, in a way that could be useful or valuable for someone else. So there's gonna be, I believe, a fruitful, beautiful kind of crossbreeding of value upon value for each other. But it starts with me, to create a stable foundation, or just love for yourself first. At least that's been my process. the kinder and gentler I can be with myself, the clearer it is that I have space for being kind to others and I'm kind to myself. And then it can help with these frameworks that help you to get get a perspective of yourself that is pretty hard to do when we're living inside of ourselves. And that's why these visual representations can be helpful, like in human design and descriptions. So I'm also trying to challenge myself to actually share what I have to offer, a part of this process of being kind to myself. Like if I want to do something that I enjoy, that feels meaningful to me, I want to also earn something from it so that I can keep doing it. And that's also what makes most sense if it has value for others. So if you resonate with my approach and would want to work with me, you're free to get in touch. I'm starting to offer some readings and sessions again, but you can read more about that on the website. And as with everything, for me, these kinds of offerings and things is always like unfolding, and they might shift shape in the future. And there's flexibility to do them in different ways. So it's just feel free to ask if that's something you would be interested in. I think this is enough for this episode. Maybe I'm gonna talk more about human design at a later time or about aspects of it. I think this is enough for now, and I think I managed to do what I set out to do with just explaining a few ways that it has had value for me. So if someone else is curious, they can also look into it. So yeah, my energy has been used. That's another way I can feel this function. I had when I was gonna sit here, I was like, oh, I really have this. I want to try to express this thing right now. I can like feel that energy coming from my kind of gut. It's warm and wants to be expressed. And now my body starts to be like, oh, I got that energy out. I got it expressed. So yeah, great.